Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Becky Schilling. It's great to have you with us for today's eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host amazing guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and MarTech. Today, we'll learn findings from Mountain's Q4 Holiday Guide and hear how to plan holiday campaigns for CTV. With that said, let me introduce our guests. John Faris is the president of Red Door Interactive, joining us from San Diego. Hello, John.
Hello, hello.
And Kristen Navarro, Director of Customer Success at Mountain, is joining us from Orange County, California. Hello, Kristen.
Hi.
Before we get into it, to our audience, let's keep it conversational. Just use the chat window on the right to tell us where you're joining us from and to submit your questions. We'll do our best to get to as many of your live questions as we can during the Q&A, so keep them coming. We have great content planned for you today. Kristen, over to you.
Thanks, Becky. And hello, everyone. John and I are excited to be spending the next 30 or so minutes with you talking all things holiday to ensure that you and your customers are prepped and ready to make this 2024 holiday season one of the best and most successful ones yet. As far as the agenda goes, we'll be discussing the evolution of Q4 and holiday shopping trends, what advertisers need to know about the Cyber 5 weekend, how the election is influencing this year's advertising strategies, and strategies to maximize this year's holiday sales impact. All right, let's get started.
Let's do this.
This goes without saying, but holiday still tops the charts when it comes to advertiser opportunity and consumer spending. And I can say with serious confidence that this trend will continue for years to come. As far as last year goes, holiday retail sales hit a record of $964 billion, which was up 3.8% from the previous year, which even beat out the analysts' expectations for the year. I think despite inflation concerns and somewhat cautious analyst predictions, the 200 million US shoppers we saw last year, they're resilient, they're engaged, and they're ready to keep this snowball rolling, which only means advertisers need to simultaneously keep up the momentum.
Yeah, and I actually just heard this morning that retail sales were up 1% in July, so that's a good sign. And then we'll likely see at least one interest rate cut from the Fed in September. So that should hopefully boost consumer confidence and spending in the holiday period.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I can speak for myself and probably many, many others here today that we shop on Black Friday, we shop on Cyber Monday, we shop on the days in between, and may even shop on Thanksgiving, which is how this whole long shopping-filled weekend is now commonly referred to as the Cyber 5. While Black Friday is and probably will always be the biggest single shopping day, with e-commerce sales up 8.5% year over year, there were 200.4 million consumers shopping during the whole Cyber 5 weekend in 2023. And of those 200 million shoppers, on average, consumers spent around $300 on holiday-related purchases, with 70% of those being gifts. I think one key point I really don't want us to lose sight of is that 55% of consumers' Cyber 5 purchases were specifically driven by sales and promotions, further justifying the critical role that the marketing strategy and efforts play. And of course, with the election this year, we'll have political spending at an all-time high. We'll have quite a bit of noise, for lack of a better word, across social channels, especially in October and November. But realistically, that and obviously that'll probably bleed into January. But all this to say is it's more important than ever to keep brand safety top of mind, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Yep, yeah, we'll dive into that more. You've probably seen the two presidential contenders raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and a lot of that goes to advertising. In aggregate, even more goes to those competitive House seats, Senate, governor races, and then local down ballot races. And that's actually billions of dollars that's going to happen before these elections wrap up. So a lot to compete with there.
Yes, interesting year to come. Not only has the opportunity grown in the industry as a whole, but we specifically in the CTV world have the numbers to show how it's grown in CTV. Not only did Mountain's advertisers spend more on our platform in 2023 than they did the year prior, and we'd expect that same plan progress as years to come, but the campaigns also drove better performance across a few key metrics that I'll highlight here. On average, we saw a 19% higher return on ad spend, 41% higher impressions, and 17% higher revenue. All this to say is customers' TV ads got in front of even more of their highly engaged audience, and that audience is ready, able, and willing to take action.
Yeah, that totally makes sense because of the urgency of gift shopping really pushes people down the funnel faster than usual during this period, right?
Yes, exactly. So if it wasn't already clear, 2024 holiday season is going to be big, and taking advantage of the season starts with the campaign setup. Everything from timing, targeting, budgeting, and of course, creative, those are all critical variables in this year's success. So I'll be spending the next few minutes walking you through these tips and tricks. Tip number one, if you're planning to start campaigns on or around Black Friday, you're going to be too late. So definitely prioritize getting in front of consumers and really staying top of mind as early as possible before those key shopping weekends. And as we all know, those tend to creep up faster and faster each year.
Yeah, last year we definitely saw the trend of brands trying to get ahead of the rush. Even the Black Friday specific offers and emails that I was getting seemed to start flowing like a week or two before, right?
Yes, every year it's earlier and earlier. So with that, we recommend that you advertise throughout the entire duration of Q4 to maximize results. But I would even argue that we take this one step further and really start now if you haven't already, but you utilize Q3 to focus on creative and audience testing so that by the time of Q4, the results are in, the data has been analyzed, and we have that ideal campaign strategy in place in prep for that peak shopping season. What we did see on the Mountain side is advertisers that ran all quarter long last year had a 37% lower cost per visit, 115% higher return on ad spend compared to those that didn't.
Yeah, that's a really good call. When you feed the beast, you give the algorithms more data, you're just going to get more and more efficient with your spend.
Exactly. Beyond timing, which I've talked about enough, it's important to have a full funnel marketing strategy to really reach consumers in every and any point in their path to purchase journey. So within Mountain CTV campaigns specifically, we always encourage a mixture of both prospecting and retargeting to drive optimal and efficient performance.
Yeah, totally. You have to create that demand and then capture it, right? That's actually what I love about Mountain, especially during the holiday, is you can reach people at every stage of that journey. And because it's holiday and people are pushed down funnel, you're going to convert probably even more than normal.
And for context on that, our advertisers that ran both tactics during last year's holiday season saw 89% higher return on ad spend compared to those that ran prospecting alone. In addition to that, they saw 141% higher revenue, 190% higher verified visits, 89% lower cost per visit, and an 86% lower cost per acquisition. So if those stats alone don't convince you to capitalize on the opportunity this year, hopefully the next slides do. While we've talked a lot about Q4, I don't want us to lose sight of the importance of Q5, which is otherwise known as Q1 for those not in the industry. It's reported that 64% of US consumers are likely to buy gift cards as holiday gifts. And whether this is intentional or not, and it's typically not, I somehow always end up being part of that 64% during the holiday shopping season. And we don't want advertisers to leave revenue on the table by cutting spend short in December and into the new year.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a procrastinator like me. Printable gift cards, digital gift cards, definitely my friend. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but I've also received printouts of pictures of the gift I'm about to receive. So
been there too. And the good news about gift cards is you don't have to worry about the shipping cutoffs. And recipients love to spend those gift cards right after the holidays. So, the key takeaway here is keep up the spend throughout the entire month of December and into the new year to really capitalize on those gift giving opportunities and redeeming opportunities. All right, as far as budget and timing goes, I have a few suggestions. So this year is the shortest possible time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which means brands need to create that same sense of urgency in their promotional messaging and really speak to those potentially last minute shoppers before that window has passed. And I recommend kicking that off as soon as the holiday season begins. So to map this out by month, here's kind of the secret sauce or the recipe, so to speak. Like I mentioned previously, take advantage of Q3. We're in it right now, specifically August and September, to test various creatives, fine tune your audience and button up that Q4 strategy in terms of your marketing mix, budgeting, timing, and creative. And then leverage what we've learned in August and September to activate both prospecting and retargeting campaigns in October. Sounds early, but I promise you it's not. The emphasis here is to really heavy up on prospecting to build that retargeting audience pool early and in prep for prime time. Then November comes around, biggest month of the year. Conquer your Cyber 5 weekend by activating holiday creative early in the month and increasing your retargeting spend the weeks prior to Black Friday. While retargeting becomes huge at this time, it also is important to maintain prospecting efforts to continue driving site traffic throughout the season and into December, second biggest month of the year. Ensure you have engaging creative, you're targeting those high affinity shoppers, create that appropriate sense of urgency that we spoke to previously, and be able to pivot the strategy as needed after the shipping cutoff and into Q5. Now, while we focus primarily on CTV strategy, these tips are really translatable and transferable to probably every marketing channel, and that really maximizes the halo effect that we see across the board. We just need to ensure that all the digital tracking and measurement are dialed in order to see that full impact. Not only is this important so that you can measure the performance of your CTV campaigns, you'll also need to measure the halo impact that CTV campaigns on your search and social performance strategies. Mountain's connected TV campaigns have generally produced 9% stronger conversion rates for paid social, 22% stronger conversion rates for paid search after adding Mountain. So that really doubles down on the value of having the tracking in place and being able to see that halo impact. All right. I know by now you've probably heard enough of me talking, so I'm going to pass it over to John to take it from here.
Yeah, but before we leave that tracking point, at Red Door, we do a lot of technical tracking audits, and we find gaps every time, or at least enhancements that could be made to capturing your first-party data better. And so this is critical, getting your tracking right. Even though Google is not deprecating cookies in Chrome, your first-party data is really critical to your advertising strategy. So collecting as much as possible is really important. So coming back to the election really quickly, one thing to keep in mind is if you don't have enough budget to spend nationally, some states that you might consider avoiding are those electoral swing states. That's Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. And then also one really competitive senatorial race is going to be in Montana. Not that you were planning to spend tons in Montana, but you really want to, even outside of election year, you really want to be careful about spreading yourself too thin. If you have budget to advertise nationally, great, go for it. If you have a really niche audience that you can get good reach and frequency with nationally, great, go for it. But otherwise, you should think about narrowing that geographic footprint for your advertising. And that's going to really allow you to see a measurable impact on your brand, see a measurable impact in offline sales. Now, if you're an e-commerce brand, maybe less important. Those transactions can come from anywhere. But if you're selling offline or trying to measure brand impact, you're going to want to be a little bit more careful about how far you spread yourself thin. And then another electoral consideration is just your brand safety, something you always want to be paying attention to. But in an election year, critical that you know where your ads are showing up and you're avoiding any of those unwanted associations with extremism or any other inappropriate content. So with respect to that, what we do encourage cross-channel campaigns. We know social media can be tricky to manage even in the best of times. And I would say Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, is expected to be one of those extra tricky places in the political season. So that might be one place you might want to avoid. And on the other hand, CTV is inherently brand safe, thanks to our friends at the FCC. So just ensure that you're partnering with somebody like Mountain that offers premium inventory on only the best networks. So we've spent enough time on the election, I think. Getting into planning for holiday. I know some people get nervous about creating holiday specific advertising assets, and that might feel overwhelming. Doesn't necessarily have to be. You could go do a full live shoot that's very holiday specific. I would say that if you can't afford that, that post-production is definitely your friend. You might be able to mix a smaller shoot for holiday with your older B-roll. And even if you just have to repurpose your existing footage, you can be successful by applying a few evergreen practices and then customizing your end cards, which we'll actually talk more about, customizing your end cards for holiday. So first best practice seems pretty obvious, but some advertisers miss it, is a clear call to action with urgency and direction. That's how you're going to drive that direct response. That applies to not only the on-screen copy, with which most advertisers are good about including, but also your voiceover, and so that those things track together. And then a URL and logo that's persistent, right? So viewers know where they can learn more, where they can convert, what brand name to type into Google or whatever search engine is their favorite. And then we'll dive in deeper to this, but you also want multiple iterations of that ad creative so that you can be A/B testing throughout your campaign. Mountain shows, as you can see here, their study shows that when you include that CTA with voiceover, the logo's persistent, the URL's persistent throughout the ad experience, that you see a 41% lower average cost per view and 112% higher average conversion rate. And if you put those two things together, you're really going to be improving your cost per acquisition and your return on ad spend significantly. So your targeting, your placement, all of that's important, like we've talked about, but your ads have to be memorable if you want to capture people's attention, hold it, and drive them to action. And we know that ads that spark an emotional response are proven to outperform what you might call dull ads that don't elicit any emotional response from people. And storytelling does a great job at evoking emotions in humans for thousands of years. So leverage that storytelling. And in the holiday, you might consider themes of joy or family, any charitable endeavors or giving that your brand is doing. All of that resonates really well during the holiday period. But you don't have to be sappy. You can be happy. You can have an ad that elicits excitement or surprise, is clever or witty. The idea is to get a reaction out of people, right? Regardless, you have to really be authentic to your brand. So don't try to manufacture a story. Instead, you really want to uncover the truth about your brand, right? Lean into the story of why your company exists, what the core values are, and of course, how your products or services make people's lives better. And then beyond emotion, the next most effective creative vehicle is around sustainability. Also relevant for the holiday season because there's so much shipping going on and so much packaging involved in holiday gift giving. So sustainability can be an effective creative message, highlight any eco-friendly practices or sustainable products that you have to appeal to those environmentally conscious consumers. And then I think most brands today are serving a really diverse audience, right? And in order to connect with that audience, you want to make sure your ads are inclusive and that you're representing your diverse audience within your advertising and reaching that broader target market that you're trying to. And then diving into some tactical areas, it's really important, and I alluded to this earlier, that you align the creative from your ad, if at all possible, with your retail merchandising, with any other traditional or digital advertising that you're doing, and that your ad look, feel, and messaging carries through to the landing page, right? That's just going to improve that relevancy and decrease bounce rates, increase conversion rates, all the good things you're looking for. And then consistency drives better brand building beyond just the performance outcomes. So consistency builds that mental availability of your brand in people's minds, which then primes them to buy from you instead of a competitor. And this is going to be really critical for those of you that are trying to drive offline sales with your CTV and other advertising efforts. And then lastly, just for efficiency's sake, consider an evolving series of end cards and CTAs based on the timing of when your holiday flight, where you are in your holiday flight, right? So that can evolve over time. You can have an end card that's very Black Friday offer specific, then a Cyber Monday offer specific, end card getting to last day to ship, to ultimately, like Kristen recommended, offering gift cards when you're kind of past those key shipping dates.
Yeah.
And that way, you don't have to change the whole ad to cover off on all these different important phases of the holiday season.
Exactly. And that's one thing I'd even double down on. Even like the simplest of creative changes can really generate the biggest results. Doesn't need to be anything too, over the top or flashy, but changing just that one variable to make it relevant with the season and the timing is really the key to success.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know Q4 is a season of ongoing optimization, like every season should be, really. This is an important time of year, though, because for a lot of brands, the majority of their sales might happen in this very short period. So you want to maximize those results. A/B testing is a way to do that. And that can actually start before you ever launch your campaign. So pre-testing your holiday creative concepts, especially if your concept is off premise, then you're going to really struggle even, once you create those assets. And you can do that with research panels. And then it doesn't have to break the bank, right? Like spend a few $1,000s up front to ensure that your 5 or 6 or 7-figure spend during this period isn't wasted on poor creative that's not resonating or driving the action you're looking for. And then once you land on a campaign concept, it's really important, if you can, to develop multiple variations of your assets for those ongoing testing purposes. And like Kristen alluded to earlier, if you can have evergreen campaigns that are running earlier in Q4 or throughout the year, you can incorporate insights from some of the tests that you're doing leading up to Q4 into your Q4 creative. That's going to really benefit you. And then another thing to consider is that testing doesn't have to stop with your ad creative, right? It's just one part of the path to purchase. And so you want to test and optimize your holiday landing pages to squeeze the most conversions out of that media spend and get ahead of the game by optimizing really that full funnel, right? All the way to the purchase, especially if you're in an e-commerce environment. And then audience testing. So during the holiday, this is actually a really interesting time to test different audiences than just your core market. And one of those key audiences is going to be gift givers to that core market. So you want to think not just about your target, but also what do the friends and family members of that target look like? What are their key motivations? What are their category entry points when they're thinking about giving a gift to your target audience. And then just want to leave you on this slide with a couple final words of caution around holiday testing. Testing is great to squeeze the most out of your spend, but you want to avoid large and complex tests because those can be risky. And this is not a time of year when you want to be restructuring your entire account or trying something too off the wall, because your CFO is going to be looking for results. So keep it simple. And as we noted earlier, people are really far down funnel during this period. So I wouldn't expect your tests that you do during the holiday season to translate into Q1, into Q2. You're going to just see different behavior. So be aware of that. You might not get quite as good of results from the same thing that you tested in Q4 when you're looking at results in Q1, Q2. So key takeaways: holidays continue to grow. It's an exciting time, and it's an opportunity for advertisers, for a lot of advertisers, to make their year. And this year's not going to be any different. So be prepared. Start now. Start planning now. Start testing now. We also know that Black Friday, it's not just one day anymore. You have the whole Cyber 5, and you want to adjust your planning and creative appropriately and really run all the way through the end of Q4 to capture those gift card givers, those people printing out pictures of gifts, and then leverage learnings from the rest of the year to make effective creative that converts, follow those best practices that we talked about, and continue to optimize throughout your campaigns. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Becky to see what sort of audience questions we have.
Great. Thank you guys for sharing all that great information about maximizing your holiday season CTV ads. Some key takeaways: start early, test in Q3, go full funnel to reach consumers across the journey, make it memorable, and don't forget Q5. So as you guys mentioned, the audience has some questions for you. So the first question, John, I'm going to ask this of you. If I have a limited budget, how do I balance creating new video creative that is holiday specific with my ad spend?
Yeah, like we talked about, you don't necessarily have to develop holiday specific creative from scratch. And you can use post-production. You can use those end cards to really drive home your holiday messages. The broader question, I think, is how much should you spend on creative if you have a very limited advertising budget for the actual media spend? And you do definitely want to be cognizant of that. If you have if you have $60,000 for the whole quarter, you don't want to spend half of that, developing brand new holiday creative from scratch. So use post-production. That can be your friend. But if you can't afford to develop new live action or even animated ad assets, then I would definitely do that just to squeeze the most from a relevancy perspective out of that period.
Great. And then a question about timing. Kristen, I'll direct this one to you. I haven't started my advertising on CTV yet. Is it too late to start for Q4?
It definitely isn't. But I would suggest starting sooner rather than later. Like I talked about too, take advantage of the next couple of months. Yes, this is like the calm before the storm, but it's a great opportunity to test various creative strategies, audiences, landing pages, kind of really understand your marketing mix so that you know what resonates best with your consumer before it's go time. And like I said, it does feel like the holiday promotions start earlier and earlier each year. So, while Cyber 5 is the prime time, that's peak weekend, it is important to have your brand top of mind, even while consumers are in that early consideration stage. You want to have like a cohesive messaging. John mentioned this across all of your different marketing channels, and have that buttoned up Q4 strategy in place and in action as soon as possible to avoid leaving any money on the table, especially when the stakes are the highest.
And then Kristen, this one kind of dovetails really nicely in with what you just said, but When should we start pushing the holiday messaging? Is it too soon in September, October?
I would suggest, I mean, obviously align it with your promotional calendar, but knowing that the sales and the promotions tend to start as soon as possible, I would definitely consider switching creative, in the back half of October, and then really double down on that, pick up budgets in November and leading up to Cyber 5 weekend.
Great. Another timing question. John, this one for you. My brand is B2B. Should I hold off on advertising during Q4 due to competition from B2C brands?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on CTV, with Mountain in particular, they're buying up front. So that competition is not as much of an issue. The costs are going to remain the same to you one way or another. Other platforms, it can be a consideration, although you're not going to see heavy consumer brand spending on LinkedIn, right? So you're not likely to see rising CPCs there. On the terms you're bidding on in Google search or search engine of choice, we're seeing rising CPCs for B2B brands regardless, but I don't think holiday is really going to impact that because those consumers aren't going to be dipping into your consumer brands aren't going to be dipping into your keyword set so much. So I don't think it's a huge consideration from a competitive perspective on those digital channels and CTV. On linear, on broadcast, yes, maybe so. It's a more noisy time. Same token, it's really important for B2B advertisers to be priming their audience for those Q1 budget resets, right? That's when a lot of decisions get made about selecting marketing technology or business technology, selecting new service partners. And so being in front of them in Q4 is really, really important actually to prime them for that Q1 kind of category entry point.
Great. And then Kristen, one for you. What type of results should I be looking for to be successful in the new year?
This is a good one. And I have a vague but hopefully directional response. But results are really going to vary significantly depending on your overall marketing mix, your industry that you sit in, the investments in different marketing channels, and then just your organic brand recognition alone. So, at the end of the day, the one thing that is consistent across all businesses is we're really striving to improve the bottom line. So whether you're looking to meet specific revenue or return on ad spend targets, decrease cost per acquisition costs, generate an increase in site traffic, or simply increase like brand and product or service awareness, like what you do in Q4 really does and will set a strong tone for the year ahead. And I would say a high benchmark that you set this Q4 to exceed for future holiday seasons to come, look at last Q4 and then strive this year and beyond to perform above that.
All right, guys, we have time for just one more question. And I was thinking about the general feel for what's happening right now with the economy, with the election, with politics. It can feel pretty tight and heavy. Do you guys have any tips for creative during this time span when things can feel a little bit tight? John, do you want to start?
Yeah, totally. It's leading into those. It goes back to what I was talking about with emotions. If people are feeling tight and heavy and uncomfortable, there's an angle in on acknowledging that, right? And then doing something lighthearted. Or if you're not going to kind of acknowledge it explicitly, you can do that more implicitly through your concept, or just take a lighter direction, right? Leaning into those themes that I talked about with excitement, surprise, happiness, or holiday specific things around joy and being with family. So I think that's really the way to do it. And it gives you the opportunity to kind of snap somebody out of that. I think it's understanding the concept is the context is going to be a really good springboard for you and your creative team to think about, this is how people are feeling now. How do we break them out of that? And I would say those steadfast things like storytelling, leaning in on emotion, being clever and witty, getting people to laugh, and even potentially laugh at, the tougher things that are going on. So that would be my advice.
I would echo that. And, one thing we also touched on too is the brand safety element. So making sure that where your ads are serving, right? There's full transparency there, and to avoid, serving against any, unwanted content or inappropriate content for your ads. So just making sure that all the partners that you work with, provide that level of transparency so that everyone's comfortable.
John, Kristen, thank you so much for this great content and answering all of our questions from our audience. We really appreciate it. Before we wrap up, let me take a moment to tell you about eMarketer's media channels. Visit eMarketer.com to register for upcoming live analyst and Tech Talk webinars and sign up for our newsletters. Don't forget to tune into Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast, which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. Keep an eye on your email for the link to today's playback. And of course, feel free to contact us if you have any other questions. Thank you for all of your time. And thanks again to John, Kristen, the team at Mountain, and our eMarketer studio behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.